Welcome into the Scene Project Sports Network. I am your host, Bubba Startz, and with me today is former baseball coach, now turned author and podcast host, Tim Neiman. Tim, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Bubba. I'm excited to be with you. I much appreciate it.
Yeah, I can't wait. Obviously, there's going to be some baseball talk, but there's going to be a lot more talk about your new podcast, Straight Lines, and everything that you're doing to refire after your baseball coaching career came to a close recently. So before we get into all that, would love to give you a little bit of time here. Give us a little bit of your backstory, and then we'll pick it up from there.
Well, thanks. Sounds good. So I just retired August the 4th from DeSales University, where I was a head baseball coach for 36 years. I started real young, not just kidding, but 36 years. And it was a great run. It was a great place for, my kids to grow up at. It was a great place to, have young people come and learn education and using baseball as a vehicle to their success down the road. So 36 years, I just thought it was time. I coached in 1,401 games at DeSales. I won 868, and you can do the math from 1,401. Those are games I wasn't very good in. So the kids play, they win. I just try not to get in the way. But it was a lot of fun. It was great. But I just felt it was time and walked away. I had been approached about hosting a podcast, which, I had a little background. I'm the color analyst for the Lehigh Valley Iron Pigs AAA club. So I felt I could do Sundays and fill in some other days when the two main guys aren't there. So that's a lot of fun. So I have a little podcast, a little experience in front of the camera. But the podcast, I've watched them, listened. I didn't know. Said, sure, why not? And what do you want to talk about? I said, well, not really a whole lot of baseball. I mean, I could do that all day long. I'm really interested in life lessons and leadership and business and people that might have a story. And I enjoy that very much. And we got that rolling. I know we're going to talk more about that. So that's what I've been busy. I published 2 books before retirement, and a third one is coming out this October. That is going well. And, I'm happy. There's such the old thought process, and I'm not smart enough to come up with this, Bubba, but, something to do, something to look forward to, somebody to love, something to believe in. And if one of those things evaporate or go away, you got to fill them in pretty quick. So I think I did that. And I'm enjoying my time, here in post-retirement. But I'm very thankful to DeSales University for those 36 years. I did spend 3 years as a pitching coach at Kutztown University before that, and coached American Legion baseball. And also was an associate scout for the Pittsburgh Pirates and Milwaukee Brewers for a little bit of time. So all those things have molded me into, who I am today, I guess. And each and every one of those stops have had plenty of learning opportunities and experiences and stories. So kind of thankful I'm here today, and it is what I'm doing.
Do you feel like your, vast experience being in front of a group of young men and coaching, that's prepared you for, this second phase now? I know you just did a speaking engagement as well, and being in front of a camera, although we're often now, in our, in the booth, whether you're calling the game or you're, in your studio there doing your podcast, that you're speaking one to many. And do you feel like that coaching career kind of gave you a lot of the skills that you're using now and made it a pretty easy transition?
Yeah, Bubba, I think that's a really good question, because I think it has. Not only are you talking to your team, there might be 35 players or 32, whatever you decide to carry that year. It's not just them, it's also their parents. It's also the alumni. It's also the administration. And there's a lot of people that, kind of rely on the information. I put out a weekly newsletter while I was at DeSales called This Week in Bulldog Baseball, after This Week in Baseball. And I love the song, right? I forget what it's called. Drawing a blank. I'll come back to Gathering Storm. That's what it is. The intro to this week in baseball. I'm like, all right, I'll send this out. And alumni love this. So even though you're not speaking directly, you kind of sort of are because they loved it. And I think all that definitely has helped me. I think a lot of people can be shy. Between the lines, it's 90% of it way back in the day. Now it's more kind of 50-50. I think you need to be a really good communicator. I think people respect the genuineness of it, the intentional part of it, the authenticity of it all. I think people really respect that, and they learn to trust you, and hence you start to create a following. And I always said, you've got all these wins. I'm like, well, after 36 years, you tend to accumulate something, right? So you accumulate wins on the field, but I think the greater wins are off the field with the kids that have graduated and the impact that you've made. And now I look at it, Bubba, as an opportunity to make an impact on other people, telling some of those stories, some of those experiences that there's so many parallels, right? And you know this from sports into business into life, and baseball seems to have even more of them. It really is America's pastime, and certainly biased, but I think it translates so easily from the failures that you experience, as a player and a coach and everything else, and how you deal with that and move on from that adversity to make an impact on others. So I'm kind of, even personally, I'm trying to convey those ideas, and also in the guests that I've had, have them tell their story too. And a lot of common denominators in those guests. It's always kind of a great time. So a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I don't know that there's a greater sport other than baseball to really learn those lessons through, and to have so many parallels, like you said. A football can teach you a lot, but because of a shortened season, you don't have the ups and downs necessarily that you do in a full baseball season. And, especially in the major leagues, 162 games, a lot happens in those 6 months, right? So even in the college ranks, that you're going to have ups and downs, and you're going to have days where you're not your best and you don't put it up there. And then you're going to have those days where you are at your best and you're on top of the world. But it's finding a way to contribute through all of that. And I think there's a lot of times in life that we aren't our best, and for whatever reason that may be, but you still have to show up and to perform. And whether that shows up on the stat sheets or in the win column is kind of regardless, that you need to continue to show up, mostly for yourself rather than anyone else around you.
Well, that's true. You've got to be consistent, and you've got to show up. You've got to, one of my guests was Kevin Daly, former Harlem Globetrotters, a captain for 10 years with the Globetrotters. Man, tremendous guy as a speaker. He's awesome. But I said, Kevin, how do you handle it, throughout the course of the year? Now, they're always going to win. They're always going to beat the Washington Generals, but I said, how do you handle it? Because it is a performance. It's a show. And he said, look, I need to show up every day. He said, because it may be the first time somebody came to the Globetrotters and watched, might have been a birthday present or somebody's having a party, might have been their first time. And regardless of how I felt, that morning, or I woke up and I'm just tired, or we traveled 12 hours. All that plays into it, but could be somebody's very first time. Could be a 10-year-old in there that never saw the Globetrotters, and you're making that first impression. And he said also could be somebody's last time. And I thought that was impactful as well, or, maybe, senior citizen went and, going to get some smiles that day. And Kevin's like, it could be his last time, or she. And, I felt like, to your point, Bubba, is to show up and be responsible and be accountable for whatever you do in life. You have to be. And if you don't, deliver that impression, and I had a mentor one time call me managing perception. Yeah, I think there's pretty true, whatever's going on inside or mentally, whatever, this outward perception has to convey itself, to whoever it is you're with, and, whoever it is you're trying to impact. It has to come out, because I think people see that authenticity. They kind of know the BS meter goes off sometimes, and I think people know that. And but I think people love others that are genuine, and they trust them. They're believable, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, and especially working, as you did for, 3 decades plus in the college ranks, that you're not just building trust with your players, you're building trust with their parents, right? And bringing in new players, prospective players, and more times you're probably trying to sell the parents that you're trustworthy and you're going to do the best for their boy, more so than selling the player, right? It's easy to take a 17, 18-year-old kid to show them a good time for 24 hours on a campus visit, tell them they're going to win a bunch of ball games and have them there. But you have to build that trust with these parents. And I think that makes you uniquely poised now to be very successful in the podcasting world, because that's really what it is. And being able to convey that trust with your audience and to grow that over time. It doesn't happen overnight. Now, thankfully for you, you've, had the wherewithal to be building the newsletter and to be communicating with people for a long time. So a lot of the skills you're using are not new to you at all. It's just a matter of kind of a repackaging of that into the Straight Lines podcast. Now, what's been the most, I guess, surprising part for you moving into now the podcasting space? And, more so than talking in front of a group or a newsletter, but now being a host and having guests on and becoming an interviewer, what's been some of the surprises, good or bad, or good and bad rather, that you could share with us?
Well, that's also a good question. I mean, I was a neophyte, in the podcast world. Inept in the electronic stuff. And I mean, one of the pieces of advice I've always given everybody is surround yourself with good people. And I did it in baseball, and I'm doing this stuff so that somebody come in and get me the Rodecaster set up and the StreamYard, just make me look good and tell me what buttons to press when it's time to go. And so thankfully, I've been able to continue that thought process. You're not going to surround yourself with good people. It's, people think you turn the camera on and go, right? You just don't go. As it's, you got to be a little bit prepared, a lot of prepared. I do, as you do, Bubba, I've got some questions I always ask, kind of a safety net outline I'll send, and the conversation goes wherever it goes. And I always allow that to happen. Heck, there's sometimes I might have 15 questions and, I might use 2 of them. And that's okay. That's really probably better. But you need a safety net just in case somebody stones you, which doesn't really happen too much. But putting the outline together, doing some bio work, there's behind the scenes stuff that you've got to do. And then when the product's done, it's get it edited and all that other stuff. The surprise good for me so far is how well it's taken off. I mean, I'm well beyond my dreams. And I don't know how these numbers are. Again, I let somebody else look at those. But I know from when we launched in mid-October to mid-February, we reached 250,000 people on all social medias, kind of combined, YouTube, newsletter, anything, so any social media. So we're getting about 30,000 views on Instagram a month, which is pretty good. So here's a guy who doesn't know, I don't know what I'm doing, just having fun. And maybe that's why it's done so well. But I use a service, Pod Status, and it's been in the top 5% of Apple management in 6 different countries, which is kind of crazy. But in the US, Canada, Germany, interviewed a guy from Bonn, Germany, interviewed a guy from Hamburg, Germany. And then we had Bulgaria get in there, all 10 people over there that like me, I guess. I don't even know 10 people in Europe, let alone Bulgaria. And then the Netherlands and Sweden, it's crazy. It's just out of the blue. And I think it depends on the guest and that sort of thing. But what's also interesting is how the world is so connected. It's really this big, vast planet, but we are bonded by technology and the internet and everything else that's out there, and it becomes a very small world. in a lot of ways. So to be able to reach, I'm getting ready to do a podcast with the French Federation baseball chairman. So he's in France, so I'm going to do that. Hopefully it goes enough English. I got to lean in. Then I learned a WhatsApp. I use WhatsApp now because that's what they use in Europe. Okay, I don't know. So whatever. That's been really good. I think some of the on the flip side, when the technology doesn't work or the mic's not where you want it, and you really need to be out in front of that. I've learned that because you just can't flip the mic on and the system on at 9:30, or whatever we're going to do this, and all of a sudden there's a malfunction. That's a problem. I've been fortunate enough to have guests that can really communicate, and we go back and forth. I had one former major leaguer on, and he was good, involved in youth baseball, and does a lot of stuff. But I first started out with him, Bubba. I'm like, I'm going to have to kind of, throw some lifelines in there and kind of get him out of it. I was kind of reserved a little bit, but good, in a good way, just his personality. So now I got to figure out, as this went on, and it didn't take long, maybe 5-10 minutes. I got the personality out, find what it is he loved, and was really passionate about. And then the rest was piece of cake. So I think that can be a challenge if you don't really know the guy real well or her, and then find those things that they like and pull it out. But it's been great. And as you know, guests start finding you. And I try to put the brakes on it a little bit sometimes because I don't want to get too far ahead, but, I could easily be, as you are, the rest of the year, easily. And we do them once a week. But I am going to do, starting in July 7th will be the first edition of a regional edition, if you will. So it's going to be Straight Lines, Eastern Pennsylvania, and I'm going to roll that out July 7th. The thought is there's so many people that would love to be on a podcast, but they're never going to get asked. I mean, the one you do, what I do, they're very national and even global to a little bit of a sense. But regionally, there's a lot of population where I'm at. And I'm going to roll that out because, how about the doctor, the restaurant owner, the nurse, whoever, whatever profession, or anybody with a story that people might be interested in. And I think it'll do pretty well. So not that I needed anything else to do, but we're going to roll one of those out once a week, also starting in July. And we'll see what happens with that. I think it could go very well. And I know tons of people here in this Eastern Pennsylvania corridor, especially. So we'll see. But you gotta you can't be afraid to take a shot, take a chance, as you know too, Bubba. I mean, you can't sit back and wonder, geez, I wish I would have. Just do it. And things don't go well, you pivot and move on to something else. That's all.
Yeah, or you pick up, a 14th podcast, or I enjoy the conversations so much, and that's why I've created as many as we have, because the media world wants you to be, so niche, and that's the way that they want content to come out. But I'm not niche. I have varied interests, and I have things and conversations that I want to have that are outside of music. And that's, how the sports network developed. It's how Real Biz, to reach out into the business world and to have those conversations developed. And yeah, like you said, it's easy to get it out there quite a ways, but I don't want to stop and limit that. And maybe I will go to a daily eventually, as it sits right now. Between all the different shows that I'm doing, I do between 8 and 14 shows a week, right? And now we're starting to branch out into, possibly some coverage with some local baseball teams and semi-professional or professional or amateur. Like, it just doesn't matter to me. There's stuff out there that needs to be talked about. And whether it's always me or it goes into being someone else's bag down the way, somebody has to start it. And I feel like that's where a lot of people get hung up, is in that early going. They know how to have a conversation. They could be taught how to do some certain things, but when it comes down to the branding and the setup of a Facebook and a YouTube channel and all of these things that people just get completely stalled out on, and it completely halts that progress. And, for me, because of the experience of creating, 25 of them or whatever at this point, that it's relatively easy for me, right? I can spend a few hours and get done what it would take someone else hours just to learn and ride that, curve out into. And whether that becomes something that we do as a service and creating things for other people, we'll see, but I'm just enjoying the moment and having these conversations. And I look at, most of the friends that I have now came from doing the podcast. I was able to kind of cycle in an entire new group, a new roster, right? Cycle it over from year to year. And, all of these awesome, amazing connections that I've been able to build. And for you, I know that's going to be something that you really cherish in this phase of your life, is the doors that it's going to open for you, and the new relationships that you're going to get to, build with, people that are, whether they're in the baseball or sports world, or whether it's in your local business economy, and putting these people out on their nonprofits. Obviously, I have a penchant for serving those who, like you said, will never be asked by someone else necessarily to come out and do that. And there's so many people that deserve that spotlight, that I commend you for starting this. And I know that Eastern Pennsylvania is just the beginning of your regional series. And I look forward to following Straight Lines and everything that you're doing for many years to come.
You make some great points too. Like, I'm a baseball person, and most of these things have evolved out of that, the relationships. But the most favorite conversations I have are not baseball related. The Kevin Daly, the Harlem Globetrotters, Kristen Sheehan Play Like a Champion in South Bend. That was fun. I had Tony Ainella, who's the CEO of the Lehigh Valley Chamber of Commerce. It's the 6th largest in the country. And I thought, wow, this is cool. I just recorded a guy that's Mike Lynch. He's the pastor of North Star Church in Kennesaw, Georgia. 3,000 congregation. I mean, life-changing. And a little baseball here, not much. That conversation, not much at all. And I like to learn from the people that have other things going on. Tom Gillespie in Hamburg, Germany. Yeah, he's the international scout director for the Pirates. But what he does, he has Play Global, and they build, fields and little leagues and all kinds of stuff in Africa, all over Africa, and other places in the world. Like they were to Ukraine before all that mess started, and they were in Israel before that mess started. But they go to these kinds of places that aren't exposed to it and build. Those are conversations I love. I love to hear what people are doing, that human story, the human network. And, it has opened up a ton of doors. And, I think you'll find too, people are really open to sharing a story. It's just a matter of something. I had worked with a storyteller in Boston, and he goes, well, early on, it's probably 2 years ago, he goes, Coach, you have a warehouse full of stories. I just got to find a way to get them out of you. And I think as hosts, like you and I do, that's kind of the concept. How do I get that story out of them? First of all, do I know the story? What is it? And is it compelling? And then how can I get that story translated and out to the public? And I think that's a good way to go about, these interviews, if you want to call them, or to me, they're just conversations. And I think people can learn from them. I used to say, if you go to coaching clinic, I went to baseball coaching clinics all of my life. If I got one thing that day, it was okay. It was worth my time. And I think I look at that same way as the podcast. You get one thing out of this. You got one thing out of my keynote last Wednesday. It was worth my time. And hopefully I made a little bit of an impact.
Yeah, and I think what is so great about the podcasting format is that it's not just an interview, right? I think it's easy to get caught up in that, especially for people that aren't familiar with the kind of structure of how these go, is that there's a give and take. You're not just pulling that story out and opening their door to their warehouse and digging through all the dark corners, right? You're sharing bits of yourself, and the more you can share of yourself, the better the conversation is, because it might trigger a memory or something that they weren't ever thinking about. And so many of the things, like, you were alluding to, that you wouldn't know. People that come at it from a very surface level, and if they were going on to the TV news or something of that nature, you have a 3 to 5 minute bit if you're lucky, and they're going to touch on that big moment and that's it. And you're not going to really get to dig underneath the surface. And that's why I've fallen in love with long form conversations, and it doesn't really matter where you start. My podcast was completely about music. And all of a sudden, over the course of the last 12 months, I found myself, conversations with world champion bareback riders. I was in a presser with Rondé Barber, Chris Carter, and Cernak Faldo. And I didn't even really have the sports network at that time, right? No one was inviting me from that. It was just a matter of like, hey, we need more media people here talking about this thing. We know you have your podcast. Can you come and join us? And now that I've been able to kind of file those away and put those on the resume, that I'm able to go and open up even more doors. And now, this week's episode that'll air on the network is with the, season ticket premium seating manager of the Minnesota Vikings, right? And now it's just door after door that keeps opening. And someone who didn't have a long history in sports or in broadcasting is now opening doors in both of those areas. And who knows what comes of this over the next 3 decades of my life before I retire from this. And who knows? I don't know. I don't think retirement's in the cards for my generation. We'll just kind of, like you, work until we can't any longer. And the nature of the work changes. I think that's all.
Oh, I think you're right. And, again, there's something to do, something to look forward to. And, I didn't, I remember my wife saying, hey, when you retire, you're not going to sit around. I'm like, ooh, that's ingrained, so I certainly am not doing that. And I figured I'd be do broadcasting and some of the other things I've been doing, writing the books. But, it turns out it's not enough. And this thing has blossomed into, unimaginable heights. And it's exciting. And, we, as opposed to that 2 or 3 or 5 minute clip, if you're lucky, on the local news, you're reaching a very defined, confined area of people, right? But the podcast is everywhere. And I think one of the terms I've learned, Bubba, you'll like this early on as well, your stuff is evergreen. Like what? We're growing a tree? What are we doing with this? But it's, it's there. It's for people, forever to be able to find it, listen to it, and it's always going to be meaningful and impactful. And I've learned the importance of all that, where, as you grow too, Bubba, so this thing's growing and growing and growing, more followers, more connections, blah, blah, blah. But the people that have come on board now probably didn't see the stuff that came out earlier, right? So, you put a little clip out of, I try to do 1 or 2 of those a week of a previous guest. And, that's interesting. Well, here's the link if you want to listen to the rest of it, which you probably should do because I think you'll enjoy it. And I think it's just a constant growth engine, right? It just continues to grow, and you attract partners, sponsors, whatever, and people that want to come on and talk about this. And it's also interesting. I always, at the end, I always ask everybody, what are straight lines? And we're going to do this with you, by the way. What are the straight lines for Bubba Startz? What does it mean to you? And I've dropped 31 so far, probably have 35 in the bank or 6. But every answer is unique, and it's amazing. It's so good. And of course, that'll be another book someday because it's already written. It's writing itself. But people come out and they give you these ideas and thoughts, and it's deep and it's passionate and thoughtful. I mean, it's just so cool to be able to converse. And, here we are sitting, talking to each other, and, who'd have thunk it? And there's so many, like you mentioned, so many other opportunities and all you got to do is ask. And I think most people don't, they all say yes, hardly don't get many no's from time to time. And if they do say no, maybe you don't want them anyway, right? Maybe you don't want, it's okay, I'll move on. Have a good time. We'll get somebody else. So it's been amazing. I'm very, very much enjoying it, as are you, and you're doing unbelievably great things. Let me ask you a question. Do you get burned out with it all? You have 8 to 14 shows. And I mean, that's tough management, right? I mean, you got to really handle that.
Yeah, well, one, I don't do a lot of editing. Everything is kind of produced live as this because that's the stuff that I did get burnt out on. A year ago, before I had some of the things that I have, namely podcast AI, which has just completely changed how we do. It's not only our hosting service, but it chops up all of my clips. So
Yeah.
even after this episode is done, I'll throw it in there. It handles all of that. That was a game changer for me because that's where I was getting bogged down, not being a videographer, coming from a video or broadcasting background. I could do 100 conversations, but if it took me a year and a half to get all of those edited, for what?
Right.
Well, now I'm able to just kind of finish that, run it, and done. It made me able to do those things. I get energy from doing the podcast, right? So it's different in that, and I'll do 4 today, right? And Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I had some where I was doing podcast interviews every single day and really grinding on that, and I was exhausted, and then I was experiencing burnout. But I found that as I kind of started to batch them, I started to design it, right? But I didn't know until I got in it and was like, okay, trying to change hats between the marketing side or the editing side and the, searching for new guests or different direction that we want to go, new potential clients, because some of these things have to make a little money sometimes too. That it was hard to change hats so many times during the day. So I just came down to my schedule, right? I have the ability to make different calendars for different things. And I started to segment my life a little bit better. So I only record, podcast episodes on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but I'll do 4 in a day. So I essentially get a month's worth of content in a single day, and then it's done. And, for me, I stacked so many up because last summer I spent a lot of my time sitting here when the wife and kids were at home. My wife works at the school that my kids go to. So while everyone was home and we could spend more time together, I was still trapped in the studio until 2-3 o'clock in the afternoon. And it was really limiting to me. I wasn't in control. I didn't leave my job at the factory to be a slave to something else. And I realized that, I was creating that. So now I'm able to segment my time a little bit better. And, I can go ahead and block off my entire summer and nothing is going to falter. Everything is already set up and all the content is scheduled out. And like you said, it's evergreen. There's not necessarily something that needs to go out. Now, our weekly shows that we do for the sports and those things are a little bit different. But those are fun. Those are me and my guys hanging out, talking ball. And I live in a rural area far away from all of these people that have become my good friends. So those are more of just a hang. And honestly, it's built in a way that we have several producers and we have several hosts that for any one person, somebody can dip out. And it's happened for me. I'm on tour with our music side, or I'm, kids got a ball game. My wife graduated college last week, so I wasn't able to do my Saturday morning golf show with the guys, but we have a big enough team. And you talked about surrounding yourself with the right people, that I've been very fortunate in this, last 12 months, from doing it essentially all by myself last year to now having a team that's almost a dozen strong, and everybody has each other's back, whether they're coming from the music side of it or the sports or, our Patriot Broadcasting, where we're supporting veteran causes and, veteran voices, that we've had all of these people working together in all of this. And that's where you're going to see it. And you talked about, are we growing a tree? Well, I'm growing a whole forest, Tim. And the point was to plant as many seeds as possible in a short amount of time. Over 1,000 episodes I've done in the past 2 years. And all of those conversations and all of these wonderful people that then become the partners and the sponsors and the incredible friends that one day I hope to get to visit in person. And just because we formed this relationship online, spending a little bit of time with each other on a platform like StreamYard, it builds those bonds. And I think that, to me, especially living in a rural area, right, town of 1,000 people in the middle of South Dakota, where there's just not a lot. I mean, there's not even 800,000 people in the entire state spread out over 1 million square miles, right? So for me, it's been an incredibly rewarding experience, but it's something that I couldn't have even done 10 years ago. right? So I'm very grateful for the opportunities that have befallen me just in the last year of, interviews that I've got to had, conversations that I've got to have, organizations like Operation Combating Veteran Suicide that I get to be a big part of now. And I use that now to support other organizations like the Veteran Golf Association or Wings of Valor and all these people that are doing really great things in the world. And now I have this whole list of skills that even 12 months ago, I had no idea how to do. Right. And now we have that, all of the production stuff, and we're just getting started. Right. That's kind of the crazy part, is like, we've done so much, but we're just really, still kind of dipping our toes in the water as far as what we can do for organizations and to really do the most good in the world is the underlying course of that. I'm not in this to get rich. I could care less about being famous. I mentioned my town. Live in a town that size, you're going to be about as famous as you'd ever want to be locally. So
Sure.
there's not those motivations to me whatsoever. I don't live a life of anonymity as it is. So it's just different motivations. And I think a lot of people that get into podcasting, want to be heard and seen. And for me, I'm trying to have others be heard and seen because of the platform that I've built. Unlike you, I've spent most of my life in the public eye as a musician and building this, public profile, that my podcast was a give now. Hey, I have all of these people watching me all the time. Let me bring you into that world and introduce you to them. And some of them are going to like you, and some of them probably aren't going to care. And that's okay.
That is okay. That is okay. I mean, you're impressive. For the first time I met and talked with you like this, I'm very impressed with you. You speak well. You do a great job. What's kind of cool about the podcasting too, you'll like the story. It can be flexible. So I had scheduled a former retired Secret Service agent, right, on the Monday after the incident in Washington, all right, at the hotel. And so I get him on Monday, and it's probably going to air maybe a month or so later. And I know him fairly well. And I said, hey, Mark, I said, we're going to have to call an audible here. That outline I sent you, just kind of keep it. I said, he goes, something must have happened, Coach, on Saturday night. I go, yeah, something happened. So, and that's the beauty of it all. So we talked it was unreal. We talked all about that sort of thing and his perspective. And at the end, I said, look, because I got a whole bunch of notes. I said, don't throw them away. We're going to come back and we're going to get those the next time, unless, of course, something else happens. So, I mean, that's the beauty of it as well. So I did that on a Monday, and it came out right away. I put it out Thursday. And, again, those are the conversations I like. And I mean, you're impressive, and time management obviously is critical. And I'm in the same boat. I don't edit. I don't do any of that stuff. I need somebody to get it out and distribute it and make me look good, basically. And but I worry, as this thing is continuing to grow, and especially in a regional variety as well. How many can I do a day? But I think your advice is good. It does make me want to do more. When we're done with this, I'd want to do another one. And I think I could do that. Maybe start with 2 a day, 3 a day, and do them on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I really like that model, and maybe that's something I can follow in the future. But I'm very impressed with everything you're doing. And, sometimes you throw all the mud on the wall and hopefully something sticks. Well, you're building a hut. You got a mud hut going, and everything's sticking for you.
Yeah, one day it might be a mud mansion. Who knows? We're going to keep throwing it at the wall because I just don't know where it's going. I don't know what we're creating, right? It's a Jackson Pollock painting right now. But maybe someday someone's going to look at it and be like, that's an amazing piece of art. And for me, I'm in the moment. I love the conversations I get to have, the access that I've gained to some really incredible, not just people, but situations. And I was spending most of the money that I was making working full time on experiences. Well, now the podcast brings me all of those experiences for nothing, right? We're being asked to join these things. And to me, that's really incredible. And I'm a guy in his garage, right? A guy in his garage with a webcam. And the fact that we've been able to kind of grow all of this is impressive. I will warn you that 4 is a big number to do in a day. I know that when I get to the end of today and Thursday that are packed schedules, that I'm exhausted. Starting with 2 in a day is probably a great idea, but you also don't want to be, for me, I don't want to be beholden to like, I have to show up all the time in this. Like, I would like to take a vacation, right? I would like some days off. And if the kids have something going on or there's something that comes up, we want to be able to go and do that. And you talk about being flexible. I had Michael Coco on, his episode aired last week, and he had come from the music business. He had worked for MTV and had organized festivals and all these things. And so I'm like, my whole head is geared towards this. Well, he gets on, he's like, oh yeah, sorry, I missed your email. Started a new job like a month ago. I was like, oh, nice. What's the new gig? He's like, oh, started with a new show baseball called Boom Ball. New show baseball league. And I was like, I'm literally in the studio changing it from my music podcast to the sports podcast. I'm like, okay, well, this has a new home now. And we're going to talk about Boom Ball. And, oh, do you have a broadcast partner yet? And what are you guys doing for those and looking for those angles? And that really is the beauty that people don't see of podcasting. And as I guess, in the business world, they would call it a lead generator. That's what my podcast really is for me. And if we can find a way for that to continue to grow and compound over the course of, the next 10 years, we're already to the point where with a few advertisers and a few clients during the month, the bills are paid and my time is of value to me, and it's going to continue to just grow and grow. And much like yours is, it's going to continue to grow. And one day you're going to look back and the numbers will be 10 times what they are now. And you'll be speaking on stages in front of thousands of hopefuls and people that find one thing about what you said to take away with them. And I think that's truly amazing. Tim, I don't want to take up any more of your time today. I'm so grateful to you for coming on with me. We did roll the scroll with your website, but for our audio people, go to Coach Tim Neiman. That is NEIMAN.com. Learn more, get the books, I'm sure. Listen to the Straight Lines podcast. Anything I'm missing in there, Coach?
I think you got it all, Bubba. I can't thank you enough for having me on today. I'm sure there's plenty more we can do down the road, and we'll flip the script next time. Now we're going to get you on, and I'll ask you a bunch of questions as well. But I appreciate you and everything you're doing.
I appreciate you, and I look forward to being a guest on the Straight Lines podcast. Coach, thanks for spending some time with me this morning, and thank you for being part of the scene.
Thank you. I'm most grateful. Thank you very much.